they seem to fail to move the needle. I guess if I can say that, based on the statistics that it's out there, people have access to it. I'm not saying anything negative or positive about DEI. I'm just trying to understand why the programs are not really moving the bar a little bit on every aspect.
Well, there's a few contributing factors, and what I will say is that DEI wasn't bad. DEI became polarized because what it actually did, and it's interesting because recently I was looking at the history of polarization. Mm-hmm. And if we go back and we look at things like the Industrial Revolution or labor innovation, or we look at civil rights movements, if we look at now we're in the digital technology innovation, all of these from a social psychology perspective, all of these have cognitive conflict, increasing our ability to process what's happening. And the way that we work as human beings is we look at how we've been socialized, and then we generalize our experience based on how relative that is to us. Mm-hmm. And so this exposure to dissent, what it eventually does is it improves our decision quality. So all of the benefits that were researched in the beginning, they're not lost. It was the way that a lot of the DEI initiatives were set up, where they became about another initiative rather than an embeddedness, and a cultural embeddedness where the goal was never to separate people. The goal was always to bring people together through understanding. But what ends up happening is that when you have polarization in its initial stages, which if you look at, many people will argue, well, the civil rights movement was DEI in its initial stages. However, it was never truly integrated within organizational culture. And so if you look at who owned DEI, that varied across companies, right? If it was important to the VP of HR, if it was actually something that was empowered, if people actually put money towards it, if there was elements that went in place so that it wasn't just tied to people's bonuses. And I think a lot of the initial elements were put into place to really bring it to life. However, when you're in the entrenchment of learning, even the language of DEI became problematic because we didn't include voices from everyone. And when we exclude certain voices and we include certain other voices, what it does is it creates another hierarchy. And so, that core historical pattern where innovation is born when certainty breaks down, polarization really, marks the moment that the old story can no longer hold. And DEI didn't necessarily do that in a way that actually was felt by everyone. And so, the question is never whether DEI was effective or non-effective, or whether it should exist. The question is whether leaders and systems can hold something long enough for something better to emerge. And I fundamentally believe that based on the research, if we start using some of these belonging concepts, we can actually bridge the gap between our DEI, our culture, and the bottom line.